Okay, we are live. Hey everybody, I'm Aaron from Speaking 26, where I show pharmacists and physical therapists how to get their 26 on TOEFL Speaking by showing how I got 30 on TOEFL Speaking. Today, we are attacking question number 3. Sebastian, can you introduce yourself?
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Sebastian. I'm a physical therapist. I was graduated in Chile. I'm in the process to transfer my degree to United States to work as a physical therapist. And in order to do that, I need to score 26 in the TOEFL test for the speaking section. So we're working in that. It has been a good experience. It has been a lot of emotions in this process, but we're gonna do it.
Yes, we're going to do it.
Mhm.
All right, you're making it happen. I hear the progress. Okay, so Sebastian, if you want to take 30 seconds to get refocused on your notes.
Mhm.
Question number 3. You have 30 seconds to prepare. You may begin preparing now. Time. You now have 60 seconds to speak. You may begin speaking now.
Cognitive dissonance, it is when an individual experiences a contradiction between his beliefs and his own actions. The professor explained that he experienced this mental discomfort when he was younger because he wanted to follow a career, but he was spending too much time playing video games, and he was unable to pass um, a subject that was required for that career. So what he did, he changed the interpretation of that situation, thinking that that subject wasn't important for the career he wanted to follow. And this is how people deal with this cognitive dissonance. When their action don't match their beliefs, instead of correcting their actions, they justify their actions to make it they justify their actions trying to deal with this situation.
Okay, much better. I hear the improvement. At the end there, about the last 10 or 15 seconds.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to give my answer. This will help with your language use from TOEFL speaking grading criteria. This will help with your language use to hear how I say those phrases, describe those sentences, and integrate the words from the reading with the example from the professor. Okay. Some things that I do like here, some things I heard you improving on, where you answered the second part of the question. I heard you say deal with the situation. I think you said how the professor dealt with his cognitive dissonance. Good. And I also heard you say, quote, changed his perception. So I heard some improvements right away here. That answer probably felt a lot better to you. Sebastian, how do you feel about your answer? What do you want to continue to do well on? What do you want to improve on?
Well, I think first I was able to give a definition of the concept.
Yes.
And then I was able to relate it to the example.
Good.
And then when I had to explain how people deal with this situation, I was a little confused because I said I knew what I had to say, because I wanted to say that people, instead of correcting their actions, they try to justify well, what people have to do, what people do in cognitive dissonance, they justify their actions by changing the interpretation. So I was confused with the words, but I knew what I had to say, so that's why I was like, what do I say now?
Okay.
But yeah, I was confused, and and I didn't know what to say.
Okay, so two things here to help you say it the way that you want to say it. You know it in here, and here's two ways that I can help you say it the way that you want to, so that you get closer to that 26 on TOEFL speaking. Look at the reading, the part after the definition. So in the reading, look at the second half of the reading passage. It says things like, resolve the contradictory situation. And it says things like, they change their interpretation of the situation. Okay, so that's where you can find the words to phrase it the way that you want to. And the second way is by listening to my language use here. So it sounds like when you hear my answer to the same question, maybe the number one thing that you can immediately take from my answer to improve your answers is to see how I am going to use those words that I just said from the question, those words from the reading, and apply it to my speaking answer. Okay, so when I finish with my answer, I'm going to ask you, Sebastian, how does my answer help you improve your answer? Okay, let's do it. If you can give me 30 seconds to prepare, I will use this time to think out loud so that you and the viewers can hear how I prepare, and then give me 60 seconds.
Okay, so now you have 30 seconds to prepare. You can prepare now.
Number one, explain what cognitive dissonance is. Number one, explain cognitive dissonance. Number two, and how people often deal with it. How did the professor deal with it? Number one, cognitive dissonance is the mental discomfort caused by contradictions between a person's actions and their beliefs, what they actually do day to day, week to week, and what they believe they should be doing. The professor dealt with this by changing his interpretation of video games. Instead of addressing the real problem, he said that it's not a problem. Chemistry class is not important. Okay.
Now you have 60 seconds to speak. You can begin now.
Cognitive dissonance is the mental discomfort caused by the contradictions between, number one, a person's actions, and number two, their beliefs. In the example from the professor, he talked about the situation about when he used to play too many video games in high school. This was a conflict for him because he knew he needed to do well. He said his belief was, in order to get a good career, you need to do well in school. The professor, instead of dealing with the real problem, which was playing too many video games, he dealt with the situation by reinterpreting the situation, by telling himself, chemistry isn't really important. I don't want to be a chemist. Instead, I want to be a sociologist. The professor swept the problem under the rug. Instead of dealing with the real problem, he only dealt with his own mental discomfort by reinterpreting the situation. This is why the professor's example is a perfect example of cognitive dissonance.
Time. Yeah. 1 minute.
Sebastian, what's one thing you can immediately take from my answer to improve your answer?
I would say that the way you connect the concept with the example, with the what you had to answer in the question, which is how people often deal with it, and also you use some words from the text.
Yes.
Which I heard reinterpretation. So it was very clear. There was no doubt about what the concept was, about the example, and about how people deal with cognitive dissonance. So it was like very clear, the organization you gave.
Good. Okay, so when I asked you, what can you immediately take from my answer to improve your TOEFL speaking answer, you said, number one, to connect the concept with the professor's example in a more clear way. And number two, you heard me using the words from the text.
Yeah.
Okay. Are there any words from the text or phrases or complete phrases that stand out to you that I said? Like, for example, did you write down or remember anything? Like, was there anything that I said that's the same way you want to say it?
Yes, you said something when you were explaining how people deal with this situation. I can't remember the phrase exactly, but you said things like people, the way people struggle with the way people do this, um, they try to reinterpret the situation.
Mhm.
Well, I can't remember the phrase, but it was something that I was like, I should have said this before in my answer.
Okay.
But I can't remember it right now.
Okay. Well, let's see if you can either remember it right now during your 30 seconds to prepare
Mhm.
before you give the answer again, an improved answer, or let's see if you can find your own good way of saying it by looking at the second half of the reading passage, the words and the details in the second half of the reading passage, and then you make your own good connections to the example from the professor.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay, Sebastian, you have 30 seconds to prepare. You may begin preparing now. Time. You now have 60 seconds to speak. You may begin speaking now.
Cognitive dissonance is when an individual experiences a contradiction between his beliefs and his actions. The professor explained by his own example when he was younger that he was struggling with this situation too. He had to follow a career, but at the same time, he was spending too much time playing video games. He was struggling trying to pass a subject. And what he did, he changed the interpretation of this situation
Good.
by thinking that this subject wasn't important for his career. And this is what people do when they deal with cognitive dissonance. They change the interpretation of this situation to justify their
Good.
beliefs instead of changing their own actions. And this is the way they do
Good.
to resolve this problem. And this is what cognitive dissonance is and how people deal
Okay.
with it.
Good, good, good. That was strong. I probably messed you up during the last 10 seconds because I kept saying good, but that's okay. I wouldn't change that. How do you feel about your answer?
Much better. I think I was able to explain the last part of my answer and gave like a good sense of how people deal with this.
Yes, during that last 7 or 10 seconds when you didn't know how to finish, that's probably my fault for interrupting you, but it's okay. I wanted you to hear me say good during the 3 times. I wanted you to hear me say good during the 3 times when you made improvements compared to the answers I've heard before this one.
Mhm.
Specifically, you said, quote, he changed his perception. Nice way of phrasing, nice way of integrating the information from the reading with the information from the professor's lecture.
Mhm.
Also, I like that you said justify. I don't think the word justify is in the reading or the professor's lecture, but it's a perfect example to use in your speaking answer. Nice.
Mhm.
And then after justify, you said something like instead of altering his actions, instead of playing video games less often,
Mhm.
he justified, he reinterpreted what it means to be a good student. He doesn't need the chemistry class. Those are the 3 things, the 3 improvements that you made and that I really like from this most recent speaking answer.
Yeah, I try to use I try to pay attention in the words you told me to, and I try to think in some similar words to use uh, for my own answer.
Like justify.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Okay. So nice, Sebastian. What do you want to remember to do well on, or what do you want to improve on next time?
Well, in this question, I think I think I really need to be focused in this question because it's very hard to explain everything when you have a lot of concepts, when you have a lot of technique words. So I think it was very difficult. I have to admit that it was very difficult.
Oh, yes.
Because as I said before, as there are a lot of even like weird words, it's like a distraction for me to organize my answer. So, but just by reading the question, when it says that I have to explain first the concept and then how people often deal with it, I know immediately
Good.
that I don't have to summarize what I have to say. I really have to relay this concept to how people deal with this cognitive dissonance to give it the answer.
Excellent. We both remember. I was very glad to hear you say that. I didn't need to point it out to you. I didn't need to point it out to you. You recognized that you missed the second part of the question. And so now I'm going to pay attention to see if you make that adjustment, that improvement, recognizing what the most important part of the question is, or if you forget and I need to remind you. But yeah, it's not that you need to, let's say it a different way. Your summary, summarizing the examples from the lecture, is naturally going to happen when we focus on giving a strong explanation of the concept. And for this question, the second most important part of the question, which was how people deal with it, how people deal with cognitive dissonance. So, right, by focusing on giving a strong explanation, you will naturally, of course, talk about the examples. So, but we want to stay focused on the most important parts from the question. Okay.
Yeah. And also the preparation time for this question, it feels like nothing.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of information.
Yeah. Question number 3 is the hardest question for me. And I know from our poll in the Facebook group, question number 3 on TOEFL speaking is the hardest question for most people. It's a difficult integrated question. Okay, so Sebastian, of the 4 speaking questions on TOEFL, which one is not the hardest? Which one might be the easiest question for you?
For me, I think the question, I think I'm between question number 1 and number 2. The reason why is because question number 1, I can speak a little more about my experiences and give like a counter argument to give it like a strong answer. And also because in the second question number 2, in general, the situation is always the same. There's an event in a university, there is a change. So I know what it could happen in the lecture. But in question number 3 and 4, it's like you have no idea what concept they are going to talk about, and when you start listening, there are a lot of concepts and words that you don't know. So
yes. Okay, so I heard
you
you say you feel confident about questions number 1 and 2. So here's one way to look at it. With questions number 1 and 2, you're going to be giving your best answers. You feel most confidently about questions number 1 and 2. You're going to give a 10 out of 10 Sebastian answer for those. So when you practice on your own, or with me, or with others, if you're only giving a Sebastian 9 out of 10, that's okay, because the format, the difficulty level of questions number 3 and 4 is harder. It's more difficult. So it's like what I'm saying is give yourself a little break if your answer to question number 3 and 4, if your answers to questions number 3 and 4 is not as good as 1 and 2. Don't be discouraged. Instead, just remember, well, this question is difficult for everybody. So as long as I'm giving my best answer, as long as I'm improving, I'm doing well on the speaking section overall.
Right. Yeah. What do you mean by taking a break before question number 3?
Give yourself good. I'm glad you asked. I said, give yourself a break. For example, give yourself credit for improving on questions number 3 and 4. They are very difficult. What I mean is, don't hold yourself to the same high standard you do as questions number 1 and 2, which you just said are easier for you. Those are the questions where you're like 10 out of 10 Sebastian answer. So If you give a 9 out of 10, Sebastian, answer for question number 3, that's a good thing, because question number 3 is much more difficult for you than questions number 1 and 2. So instead of feeling like, I can't give a great answer for question number 3, realize that you probably are giving a great answer. It's just that that question is so difficult.
Yeah, that's
Okay?
true.
So give yourself credit for doing well, for improving on question number 3.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that.
Okay, great. Let's look to end this live stream here in a minute or sooner. Is there any last comments or questions? Anything you want to say? Anything that you want to remind yourself when you go back and watch and listen to your answers?
Well, I think I really need to put a little more time practicing this question number 3 to be able to explain whatever passages or lecture is in front of me, because it's really difficult for this.
Yes.
For question number 3. So no, I think it was very good because you helped me to focus in what I had to say, and the way after you give your answer, actually sometimes I understand better the lecture after I hear your answer. So what I'm trying to say, that's important to explain when you explain something, when you explain the lecture or the passage.
Okay, good. So yeah, we're going to continue to do it this way. I know what's effective for you and for the other people that I help as we get our 26s, not 24s or 25s. Our approach is a more advanced level. So it sounds like you like the way that we did it today. First, by doing the question with the same time structure as the real test, and then by spending a little bit more time on the details. So when you practice, when you study by yourself, I suggest you do it the same way. Okay, great. All right, so let's look to end this live stream, and then you and I will continue.